It was late. Too late to be out driving on roads I didn't know. I'd been on the interstate for hours, my GPS losing signal every couple of miles, the battery on my phone hanging at 6%, and the dark pressing in from all sides. My eyes were stinging from the glare of oncoming headlights, and the hum of the tires had become this hypnotic drone in my ears. That's when I saw it, a hotel, out of nowhere, I swear. It wasn't there a second before. One moment there was nothing but black forest and the occasional road sign. The next, a glow. A soft yellowish light spilling across the shoulder of the road. The building looked old. Not just old like hasn't been remodeled since the 80s, I mean old like something you'd see in a sepia. Photograph from 1902. 3 floors. Tall, narrow windows. A weathered brick facade. The sign above the entrance wasn't neon. It was painted wood, hand-lettered in curling script. The Briarfield. The strange thing. My GPS showed nothing. Not a dot. Not a name. Just blank road. I pulled in anyway. The parking lot was almost empty. Just 3 cars parked at odd angles, their windshields so fogged over I couldn't see inside. My headlights washed over them, but the glass seemed to swallow the light. Inside, the air was warm, not just warm, thick. It smelled faintly of dust, polished wood, and something sweet I couldn't quite place. The lobby was like stepping back in time. A long, carved reception desk stood at the far end, with a brass bell and a big, leather-bound ledger. Instead of a computer, the wallpaper had a faded floral pattern, and an ornate chandelier cast a golden light over the room. The man behind the desk was still, not just still in the way someone stands at attention. I mean still, like a wax figure. Pale skin, slicked back hair, black suit with a high collar. His eyes followed me as I walked in, but his head didn't move. "Evening," he said, finally. His voice was low, deliberate. "Looking for a room?" I hesitated. "Yeah, how much for the night?" He didn't answer right away, just looked me over like he was memorizing every detail. And then he smiled faintly. "Don't worry about the cost. We always have a room for travelers like you." Something about the way he said like you made my skin prickle. He slid the ledger toward me and handed me a pen. The paper was yellowed, the lines filled with cramped handwriting. Dates, names, some of them so old they were in fountain ink. When I signed my name, I noticed the last entry above mine was from 1978. "3rd floor," he said, handing me an actual brass key, heavy, cold, with a number stamped into it. "Room 312. Elevators to your left." I thanked him, though I'm not sure why. As I turned to go, I thought I saw the faintest flicker of movement in the corner of the lobby, like a shadow slipping out of sight. But when I glanced that way, there was nothing. The elevator was the old-fashioned kind, with a metal gate you had to pull shut. The ride up was slow, and I swear I felt the faintest vibration under my feet, like something was moving inside the walls. When I reached the 3rd floor, the hallway stretched longer than I expected, lined with identical doors and dim wall sconces. The carpet was patterned with swirling red and black shapes that seemed to twist if I looked at them too long. Room 312 was at the far end. I slid the key into the lock, and when the door clicked open, I felt this strange wave of relief, mixed with something else, a heaviness in the air. The room wasn't what I'd pictured. I'd expected something plain, maybe a bed, a TV, a bathroom. Instead, it looked like a preserved antique bedroom from a Victorian house. Dark wood furniture, lace curtains, a writing desk with an old rotary phone. The wallpaper was peeling slightly at the corners, and there was a large oval mirror above the dresser. My reflection in it seemed off. I couldn't say why, but my face looked paler, my eyes just a fraction too dark. The smell of the room was stronger, that same sweet scent from the lobby, but heavier now. I set my bag down and sat on the bed. The springs groaned under my weight, and I realized I was so tired I could barely keep my eyes open. That was my first mistake. I should have stayed awake, because something in that room wasn't. Still, I woke to a sound I couldn't place. Not loud, more like a faint scraping, somewhere near my ear. My eyes opened slowly, and for a moment I couldn't remember where I was. The dim yellow light from the hallway seeped under the door in a thin line, and the air in the room felt heavier than before. The scraping came again, metal against wood. I sat up in bed. At first I thought it was coming from outside in the hall, maybe another guest. But when I turned my head toward the writing desk, I froze. The chair wasn't where I'd left it. When I'd gone to bed, it had been neatly tucked under the desk. Now it was angled toward the bed, a good 2 feet closer, and I swear on everything I have, it shifted another inch toward me while I was looking at it. A cold rush went through my chest. I told myself I was just groggy, imagining things. But then I noticed something else. The mirror above the dresser wasn't reflecting me at all. It reflected the room perfectly. The bed, the curtains, the desk. But the place where I was sitting was empty, but my breath hitched. I turned my head toward the mirror, and as soon as my eyes met its surface, something flickered in the far corner of the reflection. Not in the room itself, only in the glass. A dark shape, human-sized, standing motionless in the shadow where the wall met the ceiling. I blinked. It was gone. The scraping sound returned, louder now. The chair was moving again, dragging its legs over the carpet, inching toward the bed with slow, deliberate jerks. I scrambled off the mattress, grabbed my phone from the nightstand, and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut across the room, making the shadows leap and shrink. But there was nothing there. The chair was still. The sweet smell from earlier was thicker now, cloying, almost sickening. It coated my tongue. I backed toward the door, every step feeling like it took too long. My hand wrapped around the brass knob and froze. The metal was hot, not warm. Hot, like it had been sitting in direct sunlight for hours. I jerked my hand back, biting back a yelp. That's when I noticed the wallpaper. It was moving. At first I thought it was just my eyes playing tricks. But no, the swirling floral pattern was shifting. The vines and petals twisting into new shapes. Faces, dozens of them, hollow-eyed, their mouths wide in silent screams. One of the faces looked exactly like mine. My pulse thundered in my ears. I stumbled back toward the bed, thinking I'd climb out the window if I had to. But when I turned, the window wasn't there anymore. Just solid wall. The room was changing. The desk drawers slid open one by one, papers spilling out onto the carpet. Not paper, actually, but brittle, yellowing photographs. Each one showed the same thing. A bed in this very room with a person lying in it, sleeping, or dead. Some of the faces I recognized from the guest book. A deep, low creak sounded behind me. I turned just in time to see the wardrobe door swing open, even though I hadn't touched it. Inside, there was no clothing rack, no shelves, just blackness. Not the kind of blackness you get from a dark room. This was thicker, like the air itself had been drained away. The scraping came again, only now it was all around me. The bed, the desk, the dresser, every piece of furniture inching toward me in slow, mechanical bursts. I couldn't breathe. I bolted for the bathroom, slamming the door shut and locking it. The tiles were cold under my bare feet, and the buzzing in my ears was so loud it almost drowned out the knock. 3 slow knocks from inside the bathroom. I froze. The sound wasn't just a knock, it was deliberate, heavy, measured, and it came from the far wall of the bathroom, directly opposite the door I'd just locked. I pressed my back to the door, my breath shallow. The porcelain sink reflected my pale face, my eyes wide enough to hurt. Another knock. This time, a pause, and then the faint sound of something dragging along the wall. I didn't want to move closer, but my eyes darted to the mirror above the sink. It was small, oval-shaped, and ringed in tarnished brass. I could see the wall behind me and its reflection, but not just the wall. A seam had appeared, like an outline of a door that hadn't been there before, and it was opening the gap in. The mirror's reflection widened, revealing absolute blackness on the other side. In that void, something leaned forward, pale skin, stretched tight over sharp bones, eyes so dark they seemed to swallow the light around them. But when I turned to look at the real wall, it was solid, seamless. No door, no gap, just cold tile. My hands were trembling now, and I could feel sweat crawling down my spine. I gripped the sink and tried to think, but the dragging noise started again, only this time, it came from inside the walls. The overhead light flickered once, twice, and then dimmed to a sickly orange. Shadows spread in the corners like spilled ink. I heard water running. The sink faucet was bone dry. The sound was coming from the bathtub. Slowly, I turned. The tub was filling with dark water, though no tap was running. The surface rippled as though something was moving beneath it. My instinct screamed at me to leave, but my feet wouldn't move. Then I saw it, a hand, thin pale fingers breaking the surface, curling over the tub's porcelain edge. They were followed by a second hand, veins dark under translucent skin. I stumbled backward until my shoulder hit the door. My hand scrambled for the lock, but before I could turn it, the hands gripped the edge and began pulling something up. Its head broke the surface first, slick, matted hair plastered against a skull-like face. The eyes were open, wide and unblinking, staring directly at me. I fumbled with the lock and yanked the door open. The hallway beyond was wrong. That wasn't the hallway I'd walked through earlier that night. This one was much narrower. the ceiling lower. The wallpaper here was peeling in long strips, and the smell was worse. Damp rot, mixed with that same sweet scent from before. The bathroom door slammed shut behind me. I didn't look back. I started walking, fast. My footsteps echoed loudly, as though the corridor was amplifying them. Every 10 feet or so, I passed another door, each one numbered, but the numbers weren't in order. Room 3, then room 17, then room 9. The air was thick, harder to breathe. I felt like I'd been walking for far too long, but the hallway just kept going. Then I noticed something strange. The last 3 doors I'd passed all had my room number on them. 14. And as I kept walking, more of them appeared. Room 14, room 14, room 14. My pace quickened. My heart hammered so loudly it felt like it was shaking my ribs. I reached out for one of the doorknobs, thinking maybe I'd just duck inside, but the knob was wet. My fingers came away slick and red. Blood. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over my own feet. That's when I heard the voice. It wasn't loud, more like someone whispering directly into my ear, though there was no one beside me. The words were impossible to make out, a jumble of sounds that made my stomach clench, but the tone was unmistakably urgent. I glanced down the hall, and my breath caught at the far end. Barely visible in the flickering light, someone was standing still, watching me. I couldn't make out their face, but I knew they were smiling. The smile widened as they took one slow step toward me. I didn't wait to see another step. I turned and ran. The corridor stretched endlessly, my footsteps thudding against the warped carpet. My lungs burned, my breath came in short, panicked bursts. But every time I glanced over my shoulder, the figure was closer, never moving quickly, just appearing a few steps nearer each time I looked. The hallway twisted left, then right, and I almost slammed into a wall when it dead-ended into another door. No number this time, just old wood, scratched and gouged like something had clawed at it. I didn't have time to think. I threw myself against it, and it swung inward with a groan that seemed to echo for far too long. The room was wrong. At first glance. It looked like a hotel lounge, faded armchairs, low tables, a fireplace against the far wall. But there were no windows, and the fire wasn't made of flames. It was a shifting, oily darkness, curling upward like smoke in reverse. I stepped inside, my eyes darting around. The air felt heavy, pressing against my skin. It smelled faintly metallic, like rust or old blood. Behind me, the door clicked shut on its own. I spun around, but there was no knob on this side, just a smooth, wooden surface. A shiver ran down my spine. I was trapped. Then I heard it, the faint ticking of a clock. My eyes searched the walls until I found it hanging above the fireplace. But the hands weren't moving. They were stuck at exactly 3:14. I stood there, staring, until I realized something unsettling. The ticking wasn't coming from the clock at all. It was coming from inside the walls. I took a step toward the fireplace. The black flames shifted, and for the briefest moment, I thought I saw shapes inside them, faces, their mouths open in silent screams. I backed away and nearly tripped over one of the armchairs. It rocked slightly, even though I hadn't touched it hard enough to make it move. That's when I saw the man. He was sitting in the corner, half hidden in shadow, wearing an outdated hotel uniform, dark jacket, gold buttons, crisp white shirt. His head was tilted at an unnatural angle, and his eyes, they didn't blink, sir. My voice was barely above a whisper. Can you help me? He didn't answer. I took a cautious step closer. That's when I noticed his skin. It wasn't pale, it was gray, like the color had been drained from him entirely. And his mouth, it was open, slightly, but no breath came out. I was about to turn away when his jaw moved, just enough for one word to slip through. Stay. The air went cold, my stomach dropping as though I'd missed a step in the dark. My instincts screamed to run, but my legs felt locked in place. Then every chair in the room began to turn toward me. Slowly, quietly, the man in the corner stood, his head still at that unnatural tilt. His movements were jerky, marionette-like, as though something unseen was pulling his limbs. Stay, he repeated, but his voice had changed deeper now, layered, like more than one person was speaking at once. I bolted, without thinking. I ran straight into the black fire. It didn't burn. Instead, it was cold, like plunging into ice water. My vision blurred, my ears rang, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. When I stumbled out the other side, I wasn't in the lounge anymore. I was in a hallway, but it wasn't the same one I'd been running through before. This one was silent, completely, unnaturally silent. Even my footsteps made no sound. I reached for the nearest wall, my fingertips brushing the wallpaper. It pulsed, faintly, like there was something alive just beneath it. Far ahead, I saw a single door. Unlike the others, it was painted white and glowing faintly, as if lit from within. Something about it pulled at me. Curiosity, desperation, maybe both. I walked toward it, every step feeling heavier. My heart raced, my palms were slick with sweat, and that eerie silence pressed down on me like a physical weight. I reached the door and placed my hand on the knob. It was warm, almost uncomfortably so, and the heat pulsed like a heartbeat. When I opened it, the smell hit me first, sweet, cloying, and rotten all at once. Inside was a small room. A single bed sat in the center, neatly made. On it lay a suitcase, open, filled with clothes I recognized. My clothes, and tucked neatly on top was my wallet, my phone, and a room key. Room 14. The problem was I'd left all of those back in my actual room. I froze. It wasn't just that my things were here, it was that they weren't exactly mine. The wallet looked identical, same worn leather and frayed stitching along the edge. But when I opened it, the ID photo staring back at me was wrong. The face was mine, but older, thinner, with dark circles under the eyes. The name was the same, yet the expiration date was from 2 years in the future. My phone was next. It unlocked with my fingerprint, but the background image wasn't the one I'd set. Instead of the usual picture of the skyline at sunset, it showed a grainy photograph of me standing in the hallway of this hotel. Wearing clothes I didn't own, I stared at the image, my throat dry. The battery was at 74%, but the date in the corner read August 14th, 2031. I tried the room key last. Smooth plastic, golden lettering, room 14. Except, instead of the hotel's name embossed above the number, it read, the hotel that doesn't exist. My hand trembled as I set the items back down in the suitcase. This felt like a trap, like something had been prepared for me or someone like me. The silence in the room was unbearable. I could hear my own pulse in my ears. I wanted to leave, but as I turned toward the door, I realized it was gone. The wall where the door had been was now seamless, covered in the same pale wallpaper as the rest of the room. I was sealed inside. The light in the ceiling flickered once, then again before going completely out. I was plunged into darkness. My breathing quickened. I reached out, fumbling for the suitcase, and felt something brush against my hand. Not the fabric of the bedspread. Something cold. It lingered for a moment, almost like fingers resting on mine, before withdrawing. That's when I heard the whisper. It was faint, like a voice carried from far away, but it came from everywhere, at once. Not yet. The darkness thickened. I could feel it pressing against my skin, sliding into my lungs with each breath. My hands found the edge of the bed, and I crouched low, trying to anchor myself. Then light. A thin line of it appeared in the corner of the room, as though a crack had opened in the wall. I crawled toward it, my knees scraping against the rough carpet. As I got closer, the crack widened, and I realized it wasn't a wall at all. It was a mirror. A tall, ornate mirror that hadn't been there before. I should have seen my own reflection, but the figure in the glass wasn't moving. The way I was, it was me, but not. The other me stood perfectly still, head tilted slightly, eyes locked on mine. The corners of his mouth curled into a slow, unnatural smile. I took a step back. The reflection didn't. Instead, it raised its hand and pressed its palm to the glass. I don't know why I did it. Maybe shock, maybe some compulsion I couldn't fight. But I lifted my hand and placed it against his. The glass was warm. Then the reflection spoke. Its lips moved in sync with my own voice, but the words weren't mine. You checked in, but you never checked out. Before I could react, the surface of the mirror rippled like water. My reflection's hand pushed through, gripping my wrist. With unnatural strength I tried to pull back, but the grip tightened, yanking me forward. My shoulder hit the frame, pain shooting down my arm, and then everything shifted. The room, the bed, the suitcase, gone. I was standing in the middle of the lobby again, but it wasn't the lobby I'd first seen. The chandeliers hung lower, their crystals dulled with grime. The check-in desk was cracked, splintered, and behind it stood the man from the lounge, still in his outdated uniform, head tilted, eyes unblinking. He slid a book across the counter toward me. A guest registry. The pages were yellowed, the handwriting faint, but as I looked closer, I found my name, written 3 times, each entry with a different date, each date years apart. The most recent one was today. I looked up at him, his mouth opened slowly, and that same layered voice came out. Your room is ready. He handed me a key. Room 14. I didn't want to take the key. Something deep inside me, that primal, bone-deep instinct, told me that the moment my fingers closed around it, things would get worse. but my hand moved anyway, almost like it wasn't mine anymore. The brass was warm, not like metal should be. As I held it, I felt an odd pulse, slow at first, then matching the rhythm of my heartbeat. The man behind the desk didn't blink. His smile was small, but it never reached his eyes. "I've been here before, haven't I?" I asked. My voice was low, trembling. "You've always been here," he replied, turning the registry book back toward himself as if closing a transaction. The lobby felt colder now, yet the air was thick, heavy, like it didn't want to move. My footsteps echoed too loudly as I backed away from the desk. Room 14. I knew where it was, even without asking. My legs carried me down the hallway, past doors that looked exactly the same, except they weren't. Every door was slightly wrong. One had a handle too high to reach without stretching. Another had hinges on the inside. Another wasn't a door at all, just a painted outline of one on the wall. When I passed room 12, I heard its soft, muffled weeping. It was distant, but somehow right behind the door, the sound of someone crying into their hands. I slowed, listening. The weeping stopped. I started to move again. 3 steps later, I heard whispering, low, frantic, like someone arguing with themselves. I forced myself to keep walking until I reached room 14. The door looked perfectly normal. Dark wood, brass handle, small number plate. The key slid in easily, but when I turned it, the sound wasn't. The click of a lock. It was a deep, wet, tearing noise, like muscle being pulled from bone. The door opened inward. The room was not the same one I had before. The walls were a deep, suffocating shade of red. The ceiling sloped sharply, almost like I was inside an attic. The bed was there, but the sheets were damp, leaving dark stains where they touched the mattress, and on the floor, arranged in a near-perfect circle, were 7 old-fashioned rotary phones. Each one rang at the same time. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. My hands flew to my ears, but the ringing didn't stop. It was inside my head now, vibrating in my teeth. One phone, the one directly in front of me, slid forward across the floor, stopping at my feet. I stared at it. The ringing ceased instantly. The silence was worse. With shaking hands, I lifted the receiver. I didn't speak. I couldn't. On the other end, my own voice said, "Don't hang up. Not this time." My stomach turned. I looked around the room. Every phone's cord was stretching taut now, the ends vanishing into the walls, pulling tighter with each second. The voice continued, "You won't believe me, but I'm you. I've been here longer than I can measure, and you will too, unless you find the door." "What door?" I whispered. That line went dead. Every other phone in the room started ringing again. That's when I noticed it, a small, jagged crack in the far wall, just wide enough for light to seep through. I stepped toward it, but the moment I did, the door behind me slammed shut. And this time, it locked from the inside. I don't know how long I stood there staring at that crack in the wall. It could have been seconds, it could have been hours. Time was already starting to feel slippery in this place, like it had no reason to obey the rules anymore. The phone's STOPPED ringing. The silence that followed was suffocating, not the comfortable kind of quiet, but a silence so thick it pressed against my eardrums, making me dizzy. I took one step toward the crack. The light on the other side was pale and cold, like moonlight filtered through deep water. It didn't flicker or move, it just existed, steady and unnatural. I pressed my palm against the wall. It wasn't made of plaster or wood. It had a strange, almost skin-like texture, warm, slightly yielding. My stomach churned at the sensation, but I pushed harder. The wall shuddered behind me. One of the rotary phones began to spin its dial slowly, on its own. The click-click-click of the returning dial filled the room, mechanical yet rhythmic. Then another phone started. Then another. Soon, all 7 were dialing numbers I couldn't see. I took a step back. My heel bumped into something. The bed was closer than it had been before. I froze. The space between the bed and the phones was smaller now. The air felt heavier, as though the room was breathing, expanding and contracting around me. I looked at the crack again. It seemed narrower now. Panic started to take hold. I dropped to my knees and pressed my ear against the wall beside the crack. At first, I heard nothing. Then, faintly, the sound of footsteps, slow, measured, coming closer. A whisper followed, so faint it was almost lost in the dead air. "You don't have much time." My heart hammered. I pulled back and grabbed the edge of the crack with my fingernails, trying to widen it. The wall trembled again, not from my pulling but from something moving inside it. It pulsed under my fingers. I stumbled back, gasping. The phones had stopped spinning their dials. Now they all lifted their receivers at once, the cords pulling taut. the earpieces rising to hang in the air like disembodied hands offering them to me. I shook my head. No, I'm not all at once. They spoke in unison. My voice. You have to choose. The floor under me rippled like water. I fell to my knees again, my palms sinking into something soft and cold. I yanked them up and found them wet. But it wasn't water, It was thick, dark. The smell hit me. Copper. Sharp and unmistakable. I looked down. The carpet was gone. I was kneeling in a shallow pool of blood, and in the reflection on its surface, I saw something that wasn't me. Staring back, it smiled. The wall behind it began to split open wider, the crack stretching into a gaping wound. On the other side, I could see not a hallway, not another room, but something vast and shifting. It looked like the lobby, but warped. Too many pillars, the chandelier hanging upside down. A man standing at the front desk, except his face, was turned completely away from his body. The smell of blood grew stronger. The phones all spoke again, perfectly in sync. Go through now, or stay forever. I crawled toward the wall, the liquid beneath me rippling with every movement. I could feel the heat from whatever was on the other side, like standing too close to a furnace. Behind me, the door rattled violently. Something was trying to get in. I didn't dare look back. I reached the crack, wedged my hands inside, and pulled. The wall tore with a sickening, fleshy sound, warm droplets splattering my arms. The space was just wide enough for me to squeeze through. I took one last breath of the heavy, blood-soaked air, and stepped into the other side. The door behind me slammed. I turned, but there was no door anymore, just a solid wall. The air on the other side was colder, not just chilly, but the kind of cold that gnaws into your bones, where even your breath feels heavy and reluctant to leave your lungs. I stood still for a moment, my eyes adjusting to the dim light. First I thought I had stepped into another hallway, but the longer I looked, the less sense it made. The floor stretched out ahead of me, tiled in an intricate black and white pattern that seemed to rearrange itself whenever I blinked. The walls breathed subtly, almost imperceptibly, as though the entire place were alive. Somewhere far above, a faint dripping sound echoed, like water falling into a cavernous space. But when I tilted my head up, the ceiling was gone. In its place, an infinite black void loomed, sprinkled with what looked like faint, unmoving stars. A draft whispered past me. It carried a smell, faintly sweet, like rotting flowers. I took a step forward, and the tiles beneath my feet shifted with a soft, grinding sound. When I looked back, the wall I had just passed through was gone. Behind me was only an endless corridor that stretched further the more I stared. No way back. I began walking. The tiles whispered under my shoes, not in sound, but in sensation. A subtle vibration, almost like words pressed directly into my bones. At the far end of the corridor, I saw a shape. At first I thought it was a doorway. Then I realized it was a mirror, only it wasn't reflecting me. I approached slowly. The figure in the glass was taller than me, wearing my clothes, but its skin was pale, almost translucent. Its eyes were entirely black. It tilted its head. I tilted mine instinctively, but my reflection didn't move with me. The thing in the mirror stepped closer, pressing its hands against the glass. The surface rippled under its palms. I took a step back. The mirror started to slide sideways into the wall, revealing an archway behind it. Beyond that arch was a staircase spiraling downward into darkness. I didn't want to go down there. Every part of my body screamed against it. But the corridor behind me had changed again. The tiles were now jagged, sharp, and wet. A faint trickle of dark liquid ran between them toward my shoes. I stepped through the archway. The staircase was narrow, and the walls were made of the same strange skin-like texture I had felt earlier. My hand brushed against it, and it twitched. Beneath my touch, halfway down, I began to hear the sound of breathing, slow, deliberate inhalations and exhalations, but I couldn't tell if it came from above or below. At the bottom, the stairs opened into a vast room. It looked like a hotel lobby, but one from a nightmare. The reception desk was split in two, stretching impossibly far to each side, the surface covered in hundreds of old-fashioned keys. Each key had a small tag, but instead of numbers, they bore names. Some scratched out, some still legible. The chandelier above swayed gently, though there was no wind. Every few seconds, one of the bulbs would flicker, and in that fraction of a second, the shadows on the walls would shift into something almost human-shaped, watching me. And then I noticed the man behind the desk. His posture was rigid, hands resting neatly on the counter. He wore an old-fashioned hotel uniform, perfectly pressed, but his head was bowed low, his chin resting on his chest. I stepped closer. Without raising his head, he spoke. His voice was hoarse, each word drawn out like it hurt to speak. Check in or check out. I froze. What? Slowly, he lifted his head. His face was blank. Not an expression, but literally smooth. No eyes, no mouth. Just skin stretched over where features should be. But somehow, I could still hear him. You've been expected. From somewhere behind the desk, a drawer slid open on its own. A single key lay inside, its tag bearing my name, my real name. The man tilted his head toward me, and the faint sound of footsteps began to echo all around the room, even though we were the only two figures there. The shadows on the walls started moving again, faster now. Somewhere deep in my gut, I knew, if I didn't take that key, they would come out of the walls, so I reached for it, and as soon as my fingers touched the cold metal, the lights went out. I could barely tell if it was the same hallway I'd been in moments ago. The wallpaper, once a faded burgundy, was now peeling, revealing rotting wood beneath. The air was thick with a rancid metallic temps, like old blood left to sour in the heat. My footsteps echoed in a way they hadn't before, as though the hallway had doubled in length without me moving an inch. You might think I'm exaggerating, but I swear to you, the light overhead wasn't staying still. It flickered, swayed, and in some moments I saw not the hallway, but something like a wet, pulsating tunnel, flesh-colored and moving as though breathing. When I blinked, the vision was gone, replaced by the walls I thought I knew. But every time I blinked again, the scene shifted. I tried calling for help again, louder this time. My voice didn't echo. Normally it came back to me warped, delayed, like it was spoken by someone else entirely. A stranger wearing my voice. The door to my room was still ahead, or so I thought. When I reached for the handle, the door was suddenly cold, so cold it burned my palm. I yanked my hand back, my skin numb. Then I noticed something carved into the wood. My own name, scratched deep into the surface. Letters jagged and fresh, as if done seconds ago. I didn't write it. I never touched that door before. My pulse was pounding so hard I thought I could hear it in my ears. And then came the knock. One slow, deliberate knock from the other side. Whoever or whatever was inside knew I was there. I couldn't move. The air in that hallway felt heavier with every second, pressing against my chest, squeezing the breath from my lungs. The knock came against 2 times, now slower, more deliberate. It wasn't just sound. I felt the vibration run through my bones. Something deep inside me whispered not to open the door, but the same something told me that if I didn't, it would open by itself. My hand, trembling and damp with sweat, rose toward the frozen metal handle. I didn't want to touch it, but my body moved on its own, like my mind was no longer fully in control. The moment my skin met the handle, the door swung inward without me pulling. Darkness spilled out, pure, thick, and suffocating, swallowing the dim hallway light. I stepped forward because there was no other choice. My foot crossed a threshold, and the air shifted, instantly warmer, humid, and filled with a scent I can only describe as rotten flowers. Inside was not my room, not any room. It was an endless, shifting void, filled with faint whispers in languages I couldn't understand. My eyes caught movement, a figure standing far away, or perhaps impossibly close. They were shaped like a person, but wrong. Limbs, slightly too long, head tilted at an unnatural angle, and skin that seemed to ripple as if something underneath was trying to break free. It smiled at me, not with lips, but with the entire face stretching. And then I realized it wasn't alone. Shapes moved in the dark, surrounding me. I turned to run, but the hallway was gone. There was no exit, no floor beneath my feet, no ceiling above. Just the void, the whispers, and the approaching shapes. My voice caught in my throat, a scream trapped forever. The last thing I remember before everything went black was the sound of that same knock, this time from inside my own head. Asterisk, in the end, there's only one certainty. The world we see may not be all there is. Comment below with your thoughts, and if you're brave enough, come back here tomorrow. There's always a new story waiting for you, But remember, some stories never end.